Her father had raised her alone since she was 2 years old. She was his only biological child. In his words, she was his world. On the night of February 1, 2012, he had no idea she would never come home. Samantha Koenig was 18 years old. She was a senior in high school in Anchorage, Alaska, with plans to become a veterinarian. She had been saving money toward that future. She had a boyfriend named Dwayne who her father James had allowed to move into their home because he knew it would make her happy. She was the kind of daughter who made the people around her feel like they were worth something. Everyone who knew Samantha Koenig said the same thing. She was her father's world and he was hers. She had recently started a new job at a drive-thru coffee stand called Common Grounds in Anchorage. On February 1, 2012, she was working the evening closing shift alone. She was expecting Dwayne to pick her up after work. She kept checking her phone for his text. The temperature outside was well below zero. The parking lot was empty. There had been no customers for a while. At 8:15 in the evening, a man appeared at the drive-thru window. He was the last customer Samantha Koenig would ever serve. This is Case Analysis Bureau. What I am about to take you through is the complete case of Samantha Koenig, the night she was taken, the investigation that followed, the ransom photograph that sickened everyone who saw it, the ATM withdrawals that crossed 11 states, the arrest that unraveled one of the most carefully constructed criminal identities in FBI history, and the question that has never been fully answered. How many people did Israel Keys kill before Samantha, and who are they? Subscribe to Case Analysis Bureau and turn on notifications so you never miss a case like this one. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's go back to Anchorage, Alaska. February 1, 2012. Before we walk through a single moment of that investigation, Samantha Koenig deserves to be known as more than the girl in the security footage. James Koenig had raised Samantha on his own since she was a toddler. He described himself as a biker-type fellow, straightforward, physical, the kind of man who expressed love through presence and protection. He had full custody of Samantha and had done everything within his power to keep her safe while also giving her room to grow. When she started dating Dwayne and the relationship became serious, James invited Dwayne to live in their home rather than have his daughter splitting her time between two households. That was the kind of father he was. Samantha was saving money with a specific goal in mind: veterinary school. She loved animals. She was disciplined and forward-thinking in the way of someone who had grown up watching a parent work hard for everything they had. The job at Common Grounds was part of that plan. Evening shifts, closing responsibilities, building savings one shift at a time. She was 18 years old. She had her whole life mapped out in front of her. James Koenig would later say that Samantha was never going to give him grandchildren. That he would never be able to give his daughter a hug again. That she was gone because of one man. He said it without breaking. He had been saying it for years by then, and he had learned to hold it steady because falling apart was not going to bring her back. At 8:15 in the evening, the security camera at Common Grounds captured a figure approaching the drive-thru window on foot from across the parking lot. He walked deliberately. He was dressed for the cold. He ordered a coffee. Samantha made it. She engaged with him the way she would any customer, professionally, casually, without alarm. And then something changed. The security footage shows her taking a step back from the window. Her hands come up. She is clearly frightened. Investigators who later reviewed the footage believed he had produced a firearm and pointed it at her through the drive-thru opening. He gave her instructions. She followed them precisely, because he told her he had a police scanner in his ear and that he would know the moment she triggered the alarm. He told her if police were notified, he would kill her. She turned off the lights at the front of the stand and then the back. She went to the register and removed the cash. She put on her coat. She crouched on the floor so he could reach through the window and bind her hands behind her back. He then climbed through the drive-thru window and into the stand. At 8:25 in the evening, Samantha walked out of Common Grounds with the man close beside her. They crossed the parking lot. They turned right onto Fairbanks Street. They disappeared from the frame. Before she left, Samantha had done something. The security footage, on close review, showed a light flashing inside the stand after she had gone. She had left her phone behind, deliberately, investigators would later conclude, as a signal. A clue. A way to tell someone that something was wrong without triggering the alarm she had been warned not to touch. At 8:30, Dwayne arrived at Common Grounds to pick her up. The lights were off. The stand was empty. He called her cell phone multiple times and received no answer. He assumed she had caught a ride with someone else and drove home to wait. At 11:30 that night, Dwayne received a text message from Samantha's number. It read, "I know what you did. I am going to spend a couple of days with friends. Need time to think. You have been acting weird. Let my dad know." Dwayne was confused. He showed the message to James. James read it once and said, "This does not sound like Samantha." At 3 o'clock in the morning, Dwayne was on the porch unable to sleep when he saw a figure moving through his truck in the driveway. He shouted. The figure ran. He went inside for James. By the time they returned, the figure was gone. Dwayne assumed it was a neighbor. He did not call the police. What neither of them knew was that the figure in the driveway was the man who had taken Samantha. He had driven her to his property, secured her in a shed just feet from where his 10-year-old daughter was sleeping, and had come back to Dwayne's truck to retrieve one specific item, Samantha's ATM debit card, which she had told him was there. He needed that card. He had a plan that required Samantha to appear alive long after she was gone. On February 2, 2012, the Anchorage Police Department received a missing persons call. Officer Kevin Ehm was the first to arrive at Common Grounds. He spoke with James and Dwayne. He heard about the strange text, the figure in the driveway, and the empty coffee stand. His initial read was cautious, no sign of struggle, no obvious evidence of a crime, a young woman who had sent a message suggesting she was upset with her boyfriend. The barista who had opened Common Grounds that morning gave investigators the first concrete detail. The register was empty. The deposit bags were gone. Someone had cleared the money. There was no sign of a struggle anywhere in the stand. Everything changed when investigators reviewed the security footage. What they saw on that tape was not a young woman who had walked off shift voluntarily. What they saw was an abduction, methodical, controlled, and executed by someone who had thought through every step before he walked across that parking lot. The man on the footage was almost entirely out of frame. He had positioned himself deliberately to avoid the camera's range. The only images investigators had were fragments, partial body, clothing details, movement. Enough to confirm what had happened. Not enough to identify who had done it. The Anchorage Police Department launched a full investigation. The footage was released publicly. Tips began coming in. But the man who had taken Samantha Koenig was not someone who left trails that tips could find. He had been avoiding exactly this kind of investigation for years. If you are still with me, drop "I'm still here" in the comments right now. Let's see who is following every detail of this case. Hit that like button. It keeps Samantha's story in front of people who need to hear it. Now let's talk about who Israel Keyes actually was, because what the FBI eventually uncovered about this man is unlike anything they had encountered before. Israel Keyes was 34 years old at the time of Samantha's abduction. He was a licensed contractor based in Anchorage. He had a girlfriend and a 10-year-old daughter. He was active in his community. He owned property. He paid taxes. He flew under the radar of every law enforcement database in the country, because he had spent years engineering his life specifically to remain invisible. What investigators would eventually discover about Israel Keyes was that he represented something the FBI had almost no framework for. He was not impulsive. He was not disorganized. He did not leave evidence at scenes because of panic or incompetence. He did not kill people he knew. He did not operate in a single geographic area. He selected victims at random, people with no connection to him, in states where he had no ties, during travel that was itself carefully constructed to create distance between his regular life and his crimes. Years before committing a murder, Keyes would travel to remote locations across the United States and bury what investigators came to call kill kits, waterproof containers concealed in the ground containing the materials he would need: rope, gloves, tape, zip ties, firearms, ammunition. He would then return to those locations months or years later, retrieve the kit, and commit the crime using equipment that had never passed through an airport, never been purchased near the target location, and never been linked to his name. He never used his phone near a crime scene. He paid cash. He avoided patterns. He understood that the way most killers were caught, through geographic profiling, through connection to the victim, through digital evidence, simply would not apply to him because he had designed his method to defeat every one of those investigative tools. The Samantha Koenig abduction was different from his previous crimes only in one respect. It was local. She was not a random stranger he had encountered during carefully planned travel to an unfamiliar state. She was an 18-year-old girl working alone at a drive-thru coffee stand a short drive from his own home. That deviation from his established pattern, choosing a victim close to his own life, was the decision that eventually unraveled everything. The night of February 1, 2012, after returning from Dwayne's truck with Samantha's debit card, Israel Keyes committed the crimes against Samantha Koenig that ended her life. He then left the following morning with his daughter for a pre-planned family trip to New Orleans, where they stayed for several weeks. Samantha's remains were left in the shed on his property. When he returned to Anchorage, Keyes put into motion a plan he had apparently been developing, a plan to extract ransom money by creating the appearance that Samantha was still alive. He purchased an old Polaroid camera from a thrift store. He prepared Samantha's body to appear as though she were living. He photographed her holding a copy of a recent newspaper, a technique designed to establish a date reference that investigators and the public would recognize as proof of life. He then used her phone to send a ransom demand to her father, requesting $50,000 and instructing the family on how to deliver it. The ransom note told James Koenig that Samantha was alive. It told him she was being held. It told him exactly what he needed to do to get her back. Samantha had been deceased for weeks before her family received that message. She was gone before police were ever notified she was missing. The ransom note was constructed from a photograph of a young woman who was already beyond saving, and her father did not know that. He followed every instruction. He did everything he was told. While conducting what he believed was a carefully executed ransom operation, Keyes began using Samantha's debit card to make withdrawals from ATMs. He drove across the country, through multiple states, withdrawing cash while simultaneously communicating with the Koenig family about the ransom demand. He believed the distance would protect him. He believed the use of a victim's card rather than his own financial accounts would leave no trail back to his identity. What he underestimated was the ATM camera network. At a cash machine in Humble, Texas, a surveillance camera captured a vehicle with a visible license plate. Investigators traced that plate. It came back to a gray Chevrolet Silverado truck registered in Alaska. The truck was registered to Israel Keyes. On March 13, 2012, law enforcement in Lufkin, Texas conducted a traffic stop on the Silverado. Israel Keyes was behind the wheel. In the vehicle they found Samantha's bank card, cash from the withdrawals, and items connecting him to the ransom communications. He was taken into custody. When the Anchorage Police Department was notified, investigators flew to Texas. Keyes was transported back to Alaska to face charges in Samantha's case. He showed no visible distress at the arrest. He was cooperative in the way of someone who had already calculated what cooperation was worth to him and had decided to use it as a negotiating tool. After his arrest, Keyes eventually provided investigators with the location of Samantha's remains. They were recovered from Matanuska Lake outside Anchorage, where he had disposed of them before leaving for Texas. He had concealed her there after the ransom phase of his plan was complete, believing the location would never be found. James Koenig was told the news. The room fell silent. Every hope he had been holding, every instruction he had followed, every dollar he had attempted to gather, every message he had responded to believing his daughter might still be alive, collapsed in that moment into something that could not be undone. Samantha Koenig was 18 years old. She had been gone since the night of February 1, 2012. Her father had spent weeks believing she was coming home. Israel Keyes was willing to talk. That willingness came with conditions. He wanted control over what was disclosed publicly. He wanted certain information kept from his daughter. He wanted to dictate the pace and terms of every interview. The FBI, aware that he was potentially connected to multiple unsolved murders across the country, agreed to work within those parameters because they needed what he knew. What Keyes described, across 40 hours of interviews conducted over 8 months, was a criminal operation that had been running since at least 2001. He described buried kill kits in multiple states. He described crimes committed during travel specifically designed to avoid geographic profiling. He described a methodology so deliberate and so carefully constructed that FBI agents who had spent careers working serial homicide cases said publicly they had never encountered anything like it. He confirmed 2 additional victims, Bill and Lorraine Currier of Essex, Vermont, murdered in June of 2011. Their remains have never been recovered. Beyond those 2 names and Samantha, Keyes refused to provide specific details. He spoke in generalities. He offered fragments. He enjoyed, by several accounts from the investigators in the room, the knowledge that he was shocking people who were trained not to be shocked. He told the FBI he had lots more stories to tell, if they were interested. He said there were aspects of what he had done that he would prefer never became public. The reason, investigators came to understand, was his daughter. He did not want her to know what her father was. In May of 2012, Keyes was brought to a court hearing. James Koenig and Samantha's family were present. Keyes had been shackled and restrained. Without warning, he launched himself over the security railing separating him from the gallery, directly toward the section where Samantha's family was seated. A marshal caught him at the last moment. A second marshal deployed a taser. The courtroom erupted. James Koenig did not comment outside the courthouse. In November of 2012, after a television news station broadcast his name publicly in connection with the Currier murders, a disclosure Keyes had explicitly demanded be prevented, he shut down completely. He refused all further interviews. He said he had no reason to provide any more information. 3 days later, on December 2, 2012, a prison guard conducting a routine cell check found Israel Keyes dead. He had taken his own life. He had also left behind a handwritten note, described by investigators as a poem of sorts, containing language consistent with someone who viewed his own death as a final act of control. The note contained no names, no locations, no answers. The FBI believes Israel Keyes killed a minimum of 11 people. They have confirmed 3 names. 8 victims, potentially more, remain unidentified. Their families do not know what happened to them. Their cases remain open. The kill kits buried across the United States have not all been located. Some of them may never be found. James Koenig did not stop when Israel Keyes died. He created a Facebook page called Have You Ever Met Israel Keyes, Possible Serial Killer, building a public timeline of Keyes' movements from 2004 through 2012, asking anyone who had encountered him to come forward. The FBI was inundated with tips connecting Keyes to unsolved cases across the country. That page, built by a father using his own grief as fuel, became one of the most significant public contributions to the ongoing investigation. He then founded an organization called Seeking Alaska's Missing, known as SAM, which provides search support, resources, and guidance to families of missing persons across Alaska. It offers exactly the kind of structured, immediate assistance that no one had offered him in the hours and days after Samantha disappeared. Samantha's family and friends have also been working to pass the Samantha Koenig Safety Act, legislation aimed at improving workplace safety standards for employees working alone in Alaska, specifically in late-night and isolated settings like drive-thru coffee stands. As of the time of this video, that bill has not yet been passed into law. The family is still asking for public support. I want to close this the way Case Analysis Bureau always closes, with the person at the center of this story. Samantha Koenig was 18 years old. She was a high school senior in Anchorage, Alaska, saving money for veterinary school. She had a father who had raised her alone since she was 2 and who described her, without hesitation, as his world. She had a boyfriend she was expecting to pick her up after her shift. She had plans. She had a future that she had been carefully building one paycheck at a time. On the night of February 1, 2012, when the man at the drive-thru window pointed a weapon at her and told her what to do, she did something that investigators noted when they reviewed the footage. She left her phone behind. In the middle of the most terrifying moments of her life, she thought clearly enough to leave a signal. She tried to give someone a way to find her. She was 18 years old and she fought to survive with every tool she had available to her. Her father has spent every year since her death making sure her name is connected to something that protects people, not just to the case that took her. SAM. The Samantha Koenig Safety Act. A Facebook page that helped the FBI build a timeline of a serial killer's movements. James Koenig turned the worst thing that can happen to a parent into a reason to keep showing up for other families who are living through the same nightmare. Samantha Koenig. 18 years old. Anchorage, Alaska. February 1, 2012. Remembered not just for how she was taken, but for who she was before that night. Her father's world. A future veterinarian. A young woman who, even in the worst moment of her life, tried to leave a light on so someone could find her. Before you go, say Samantha's name in the comments. Then tell us, do you believe the FBI will ever identify all of Israel Key's victims? Do you think the kill kits he buried across the country will eventually all be found? This case has questions that have never been answered and this community takes them seriously. Subscribe to Case Analysis Bureau and turn on your notifications. We cover every development in every case we analyze the moment it is confirmed. If this story moved you, share it right now. Samantha's name deserves to travel. And if you want to support the Samantha Koenig Safety Act, the link is in the description.